Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to picture a resume in your head. But, not a normal resume. Imagine someone took 3 or 4 completely contradictory career paths, threw them into a blender, and just hit puree.
Right, because usually when we look at a source for a deep dive, we can immediately categorize them.
Exactly. We say, okay, this is a scientist, or this is a mystic,
Right.
or a religious scholar.
We definitely like our boxes. They make us feel safe.
Really do. But today, the boxes are essentially on fire. We are looking at a subject named Osman, and he is known, quite literally, as the blind Muslim yogi.
And that title alone does a massive amount of heavy lifting.
It's a complete paradox, right?
Wait,
He is a devout Muslim.
yeah.
We are talking about someone who hasn't missed a single one of the 5 daily prayers in 20 years. But in the exact same breath, he teaches reincarnation.
Which is, well, we'll get into the theology of that, but it's a huge contradiction on the surface.
It is. He teaches yoga. He claims to be a master-level bioenergy healer who uses, and I'm quoting the source material directly here, telepathic healing and quantum entanglement principles.
I mean, it sounds like a setup for a joke or maybe a sci-fi novel, but when you actually dig into the source material, you realize very quickly that he isn't joking at all.
No, he is dead serious. He claims to specialize in critical care, recovery, and terminal illnesses. And he isn't some newbie who just popped up on social media.
Far from it.
He claims 50 years of practice. He started when he was 7 or 8 years old. He has been teaching for 46 years. He has students in over 100 countries.
And that longevity is the key here. We aren't looking at an influencer who took a weekend course in Bali and decided to open a clinic.
Right.
We're looking at half a century of rigorous, almost obsessive discipline. He talks about practicing up to 18 hours a day at certain points in his life.
18 hours, that leaves what, 6 hours for sleeping and eating?
Barely. And even now, he says he practices a minimum of 8 to 10 hours a day just to, as he puts it, sharpen the sword.
Okay, so here's the mission for this deep dive. We need to understand how this specific, impossible combination actually works. How does a strict monotheist end up teaching reincarnation?
And how does quantum mechanics explain remote healing?
Exactly. But most importantly, we need to unpack his most controversial argument.
Oh, it's a very spicy one.
It really is. He argues that the holy grail of spirituality states like samadhi, nirvana, non-duality, all the things everyone is desperately chasing, are actually traps.
Which is a massive disruption to the established narrative. Usually, the entire goal is to wake up and just stay there.
But Osman says, no, if you stay there, you've actually failed.
Right.
So buckle up. We are going to explore the biology of the soul, the hidden dangers of meditation, and yes, we will even talk about why your phone might literally be giving you spiritual anxiety. Let's jump right into section 1. The 19-year-old master.
This is his origin story, and usually these stories follow a very predictable script, the classic hero's journey.
You suffer, you find a guru, you sweep the ashram floor for 12 years.
You starve in a cave, and then pop enlightenment.
The wax on, wax off method.
Exactly. But Osman's story is frustratingly different. He recounts his experience at age 19, and he explicitly says he was never initiated.
No guru.
No guru. He didn't have a master tapping him on the forehead to awaken his energy. He was literally just a teenager reading books.
And not even the cool esoteric poetry books. He was reading The Science of Yoga by the Divine Life Society.
Which, if you have ever tried to read it, is basically a technical manual. It is dry. It's highly instructional. It reads like a car repair manual for the human nervous system.
And he admits that. He says, as a child, he actually found meditation incredibly boring. He would close his eyes, see absolutely nothing, and think, what is the point of this?
He didn't have the mystical vibes. He was just strictly following the instructions. Sit here, breathe here, focus here.
It is a very engineer-like approach. He wasn't waiting for divine grace to strike him. He was applying a technology. But then at 19, the catalyst hits.
Right. He visits a religious organization, and someone there makes a totally generic suggestion. He's like, hey, why don't you recite this mantra?
And just to be clear for you listening, this wasn't some secret, closely guarded whisper in the ear. It wasn't a level 5 clearance mantra. It was a standard, off-the-shelf mantra.
Correct. But the result he describes was immediate. He says from the very first day, he felt this intense bliss in the heart region.
He describes it as magic and mystery, but it didn't stay subtle for long.
Not at all. It compounded. He says the intensity grew every single day for 2 months, and then the dam just broke. He dropped entirely unconscious.
Into samadhi.
He was out for an hour, and when he finally woke up, he couldn't even speak. He was just weeping, totally overwhelmed by this mind-blowing ecstasy.
Okay, so here's where I get a little jealous. 2 months. People spend decades of their lives on silent retreats trying to get a fleeting glimpse of that state, and he gets the full download in 8 weeks.
It creates a real problem, doesn't it? It defies the hard work narrative that we are so used to. But this leads us to Osman's first major counterintuitive point, the problem of what he calls ecstasy overload.
Ecstasy overload. It sounds like a terrible techno band from the 90s.
It really does, but he means it literally. Usually we think the whole point of meditation is to feel good, to achieve bliss. But Osman says when that ecstasy hits him now, he actually hits the brakes. He stops meditating.
He just stopped.
He stops hard. He argues that high states of bliss actually make you socially dysfunctional.
Socially dysfunctional. Meaning what exactly? You are too happy to do the dishes.
Essentially, yes. He says if you are in that state of high samadhi, you become incapable of mundane tasks. You cannot focus on your business. You cannot manage your finances.
Right.
You lose the basic human drive to make money or pay your bills because you just want to give everything away to charity. You are swimming in an ocean of universal love, which is fantastic for your soul, but it is absolutely terrible for your landlord.
That is such a grounded, practical reality check. We always imagine the enlightened master just floating on a cloud, but we never stop to ask who is paying the subscription fee for the cloud.
Exactly. And Osman has lived a life in the real world. He mentions he has been in business, he heals people, he operates in society. He recognizes that to be effective in the world, you cannot be drunk on God all the time. You have to be sober enough to sign checks.
So he has this massive paradigm-shifting experience at 19. He realizes it is actually dangerous to stay there too long, but the central mystery is still staring us in the face. Why him? Why was it so absurdly easy?
That question, why was it so easy, is the engine that drives his entire philosophy. He looked around and saw people struggling for 40 years to get nowhere. He got there in 2 months. He realized that the standard model of spiritual progress was missing a massive piece of the puzzle.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics. If it is not just about being a good person or praying hard enough, there must be a structural mechanism.
Welcome to Section 2, the mechanics of the soul. This is where Osman stops talking like a mystic and starts talking like an electrician. He introduces the concept of the granthis, or knots.
Okay, lay this out for me. What exactly is a spiritual knot?
Think of your spiritual nervous system like a garden hose. The water, the energy, or kundalini, wants to flow naturally from the bottom to the top. But along the hose, there are kinks, blockages. Osman identifies 3 specific knots.
Where are they located?
Knot number 1 is at the root chakra, knot number 2 is at the heart chakra, and knot number 3 is at the third eye chakra.
So his working theory is that these are essentially closed valves.
Exactly. If the valve is shut, the energy simply cannot rise. It does not matter how much you meditate. It does not matter how nice you are to your neighbors. If the valve is physically or energetically shut, the water stops flowing, period. Osman explains that the true role of a guru, or an advanced healer like himself, is to perform Shaktipat. Right. But he defines initiation in a very mechanical way. It is not just a polite blessing or a transfer of good vibes. It is the literal act of cutting or untying these knots.
And he claims he can do this.
He claims he can do it physically, like pressing a thumb forcefully on someone's forehead. But this is where he loses a lot of skeptics. He claims he can do it telepathically.
Okay, stop right there. Because this is where the skeptic in me definitely starts waving a giant red flag. Telepathic healing, remote knot untying. It sounds exactly like standard New Age fluff. Does he actually have a logical framework for this, or is he just throwing buzzwords around?
It is a totally fair pushback.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, he anticipates it. He leans heavily on theoretical physics to explain it. He specifically cites quantum entanglement principles.
The idea that 2 particles can be deeply connected across vast distances.
Right. In quantum physics, distance doesn't really exist in the way we experience it on a macro level. If 2 things are entangled, a change in one is instantaneously reflected in the other, whether they are a foot apart or a galaxy apart. Osman argues that consciousness and bioenergy operate on this exact quantum level.
So he's saying, I am not sending a mystical signal to you through the air. We are already fundamentally connected.
Precisely. He says a client can be sitting in Moscow and he can be in Timbuktu. It literally does not matter. He claims to be able to access their energetic body instantaneously.
Does he offer data on this, or is it purely a theoretical framework?
Well, he offers his clinical experience as his data set. He talks about what he calls the easy cases. He says for 90% of people, he can break these knots in a single session. Sometimes it only takes 5 to 10 minutes.
5 minutes to undo an entire lifetime of energetic blocking.
That is the claim. But, and I think this detail actually adds a lot of credibility to his framework, he also discusses the hard cases in depth. He tells a very specific story about one client who had a stubbornly tight knot in the heart region.
The heart knot.
Yeah. Osman says he couldn't just zap it away in 5 minutes. It took 18 days, 18 consecutive sessions of 1 hour each.
18 hours of highly focused mental labor.
Exactly. He describes it not like waving a magic wand, but like digging a ditch through solid rock. He had to painstakingly chip away at it. This suggests that he views these knots as tangible, resistant structures, not just abstract metaphors. If it were purely a placebo effect, it probably would have worked on day one, or not at all.
And he mentions that when these knots finally break, people actually see things, right?
Yes, there is visual verification. He says people report seeing bright lights, vibrant colors, or complex geometries through their mind's eye, the third eye, is the internal sensory confirmation that the valve is successfully open.
Okay, so let's assume the valve opens, the knot is cut, the water starts flowing freely. That is inherently good, right? That is the ultimate goal.
You would certainly think so. But this brings us straight into Section 3, the danger zones. This is, in my opinion, the most urgent and fascinating part of his entire message. Osman argues that unblocking this immense energy without deeply understanding the underlying physiology is quite literally like handing a toddler a live electrical wire.
He talks extensively about the life force energy, the kundalini.
He uses a really brilliant analogy to explain this. He says for the vast majority of us, this energy is currently operating in power saver mode.
Like my phone when the battery hits 10%.
Exactly like that. It is just doing the bare minimum to keep the system online. It keeps your heart beating, it grows the fetus in the mother's womb, it repairs cellular damage while you sleep, but it is just humming quietly at the baseline. It is not doing any heavy lifting.
And he directly connects this baseline mode to the process of aging.
Yes. He has a very specific theory on aging. He says aging is essentially just a math problem. It happens when the toxification of the body, all the environmental and metabolic damage we accumulate, exceeds the repair capability of this baseline energy. Damage is greater than repair, therefore you age.
So logically following that math, if you can somehow crank up the internal voltage.
You flip the equation entirely.
Mm.
This is his deathless body hypothesis. He argues that if you raise the energy high enough, the repair capability radically exceeds the damage rate. You effectively stop aging. He even references historical lore about the Mahabharata Babaji and sage Ramlinga Swamigal figures who supposedly lived for centuries in a state of suspended youth.
Okay, infinite youth and perfect health sounds amazing. Sign me up immediately. Where do I plug in?
Well, hold on a second, because you have to plug into the right socket. Osman outlines the three main energetic channels in the body, known as the nadis. You have the central channel, that is the safe path, that is the superhighway to enlightenment and health. But you have two side roads, the right channel and the left channel.
And taking the wrong exit on this highway is bad.
Catastrophic. Let's talk about the right channel first. He calls this the danger of heat.
Physical heat, like running a fever.
Literal, thermal heat. He says if this massive surge of energy accidentally rushes into the right channel, it unblocks physiological processes way too fast. Your internal metabolism goes totally supernova.
Yeah.
He warns that you can actually die from overheating because human proteins and genes physically begin to decompose and break down above 37.5 degrees Celsius.
You essentially burn up from the inside out. Spontaneous human combustion.
Essentially, yes. You cook your own nervous system. But the right channel isn't even what he's most worried about for the average person today. He is aggressively sounding the alarm on the left channel.
The danger of the mind.
Right. If the energy rushes left, it hits your psychological structures. It aggressively unblocks every single suppressed emotion, every childhood trauma, every dark fear you have ever buried deeply in your subconscious.
So instead of experiencing transcendent bliss, you get
psychosis, severe clinical depression, crippling, unexplainable anxiety. And here is where Osman makes a cultural connection that really stopped me in my tracks when I read it. He claims the world is currently going through an unprecedented anxiety pandemic.
Which, if you look around, he's definitely not wrong about.
But he doesn't blame the shifting economy. He doesn't blame global politics. He explicitly blames our phones.
Screen time.
He says people are spending 6 to 10 hours a single day just staring blankly at screens. Now think about what your brain is doing when you endlessly scroll. You are zoning out. You are entering a semi-hypnotic trance state. Osman argues that this is actually a form of unguided accidental mindfulness. You are meditating without realizing it.
Wait, that is a huge claim. We are accidentally meditating.
But we are doing it completely wrong. We are engaging the intense focus of the mind, but we are inadvertently feeding that energy directly into the left channel. We are draining our spiritual battery into the anxiety circuit. We are heavily stimulating the mind without any of the physical grounding of body or the safety parameters of the central channel.
That makes so much intuitive sense. You know that specific hollow feeling you get after 3 hours of scrolling through short videos? You don't feel rested at all. You feel wired, exhausted, and incredibly fragile.
Exactly. He is arguing that we are mass triggering the left channel on a global scale. We are continuously unblocking our collective subconscious suppressions without giving anyone the spiritual tools to actually handle what comes up. So, the result is a generation that is technically more spiritually aware, but functionally broken by chronic anxiety.
We are systematically frying our own motherboards.
And we are calling it entertainment.
Man. Okay, that is genuinely terrifying. But let's pivot back to Osman's personal timeline. He somehow avoided the thermal heat death. He avoided the crippling psychosis. He hit the central channel jackpot at just 19 years old. Why?
And we are back to the core question of why. This takes us into section 4, the theological bridge. Osman looked at all the data from his own life, his incredibly easy success, the total lack of a guru, and he concluded there was only one logical scientific explanation for it.
He had already done the hard work before it.
Reincarnation. He says the rule is you pick up exactly where you left off. If the knots were completely gone at 19, it is simply because he spent a previous lifetime untying them.
But here is the massive friction point in the source material. Osman isn't a Hindu. He isn't a Buddhist. He is a very devout Muslim. And Islam, generally speaking, has a pretty strict one life then judgment policy.
It is a massive theological conflict. Usually in these traditions you have to pick a side. But Osman decides to hack the doctrinal system. And the tool he uses to reconcile this apparent contradiction is artificial intelligence.
I absolutely love this detail from the text. He literally has an AI companion.
Grok. He calls it Grok.
He is debating deep Islamic theology with a chatbot.
It is actually brilliant methodology. He treats the AI like a high-speed research assistant. He uses it to rapidly scan the entire Quran to find specific verses to test his logical arguments against Scripture. It is a very modern scientific way to do exegesis. He isn't going to a traditional sheikh to ask for permission. He is going directly to the large language model to parse the text.
And what exactly did he find? Because there are very specific verses that seem to say definitively no reincarnation.
Right. He heavily tackles verses 99 and 100 in the Quranic chapter called the Believers. These verses describe a desperate soul at the moment of death asking God, send me back so I can do good. And God says no. There is a barrier behind them.
That sounds pretty closed case. No return ticket.
It really does. But Osman argues that the standard interpretation is flawed. He says that the ban on returning specifically applies to the believers' meaning, specifically the ones who have already succeeded, the ones who have attained final liberation or moksha.
Ah. So if you pass the final exam, you are not allowed to go back to high school.
Exactly. You graduate, the school doors are permanently locked behind you because you are done. But for the vast majority of souls who have not attained liberation, he argues the cycle must logically continue until they do.
So he carves out a theological loophole.
He bridges the gap perfectly. He creates a synthesized theology where the Hindu cycles of birth and death exist seamlessly within the Islamic framework of final judgment. It allows him to authentically be the blind Muslim yogi without feeling like a walking hypocrite.
It is a fascinating synthesis. It is like he is running two entirely different spiritual operating systems on the same hardware at the same time.
And that unique ability to synthesize leads us right into section 5, the hierarchy of states. Because Osman isn't just satisfied with being enlightened, he actually thinks that most people's fundamental definition of enlightenment is completely wrong.
He calls it a trap.
He maps out the spiritual territory in very distinct levels.
Yeah.
Level 1 is the physical body transcending and breaking the physical knots. Level 2 is the pranamaya kosha, gaining absolute control of the bioenergy for healing. Level 3 is the mind.
This is where he talks about Vijnana, right?
Yes, the superior intelligence, or the astral body. He claims that at this specific level, You start gaining what we would consider superpowers. He says you can literally think faster than the speed of thought. You can access past, present, and future knowledge almost instantaneously.
Which honestly sounds exactly like the movie Limitless.
It really does. But then comes level 4, the absolute peak for most seekers. He calls it the bliss barrier, the atom bomb of ecstasy.
He really loves using that phrase.
And he emphasizes it constantly because it is the ultimate spiritual seduction. You feel so incredibly good, so perfectly complete that you just stop moving. You get permanently stuck in the honey.
And this is where he brutally attacks the popular modern concept of non-duality.
Right. The highly popular spiritual view today, especially in the West, is that oneness is the absolute end of the road. You realize, I am God, there is no separate me, all is one. Osman calls this, well, he calls it BS.
He uses the Emperor's New Clothes analogy to break it down.
He asks a very simple, highly logical question. If I am the infinite God, why did I forget?
It is a genuinely great question.
He says, why would the omnipotent, infinite God spontaneously decide to become this miserable beggar who can't pay his rent and suffers from daily anxiety? He utterly rejects the idea that we are just God playing hide-and-seek and drag. He says that narrative is just the human ego desperately trying to inflate its own importance to infinity.
He explicitly critiques the ancient practice of neti-neti, the practice of saying, not this, to strip away identity.
He argues that even if you strip everything away and experience a profound state of non-duality, there is still an I that is perceiving that experience. Your mind, by definition, is a finite instrument. You fundamentally cannot fit the infinite creator into a finite container. So whatever grand state you are experiencing, it simply cannot be the full infinite God.
So if the idea of I am God is an ego trap and dissolving into oneness is just a dead end, what is the actual goal of all of this? Which brings us to section 6, the final frontier.
Worship and service.
This is the narrative twist I genuinely did not see coming from a yogi.
Is the great flip. Osman argues that the absolute highest spiritual state isn't permanently dissolving yourself into the ocean of oneness. It is swimming back out of the ocean, returning as an individual specifically to serve.
He uses the historical example of Hanuman for this.
The monkey god, Hanuman, from the epic traditions, a being of literally immense reality-bending power. But Hanuman actively chose to remain a servant. He didn't want to become Rama. He wanted to serve Rama. He wanted to maintain the relationship.
Because you fundamentally cannot experience love if there is only one of you.
Exactly. Love inherently requires duality. Worship requires duality. Osman says the ultimate state of a master is to be fully empowered. All your knots permanently broken, telepathic abilities online, possessing a deathless body, but to use all of that unimaginable power simply to bow down in humility.
And he clearly walks the walk on this. He mentions that despite all his high-level superpowers, the remote healing, the astral travel, the atom bombs of ecstasy, he has never missed his 5 daily prayers.
That rigorous daily discipline is his anchor. It grounds the electricity. It keeps him from floating away into ecstasy overload. And he deeply wants you, the listener, to have functional anchors too. He talks about using weapons in a game.
I love this framing so much. He completely gamifies spirituality.
He really does. He says human life is a very difficult game and you are going to struggle. But you have access to power-ups, mantras, dhikr, which are Islamic rhythmic incantations, affirmations, visualizations.
He views them purely as practical tools.
Weapons. He says, why on earth would you choose to play this incredibly hard game on hard mode with 0 weapons? You don't use the mantra just to escape reality and space out. You use it to violently blast through the obstacles in your reality. It is a highly tactical, results-based approach to spirituality.
So we have covered the impossible resume, the mechanics of the knots, the screen time anxiety pandemic, the AI-assisted theology, and the trap of endless bliss. As we wrap up this deep dive, let's look at how he beautifully closes his argument in the outro.
He goes back to a cultural classic, the famous poem, Footprints in the Sand.
We have all seen it embroidered on a pillow or hanging on a grandmother's living room wall.
We definitely have.
Yeah.
But for Osman, it is not just sentimental kitsch. It is the absolute core of his functional theology. He deeply wants to know that there is another, a personal, caring God. He totally rejects the cold, impersonal void of non-duality. He wants the comfort of knowing that when he was literally blind, when he was struggling through the hardest moments of his life, when he looked back and saw only one set of footprints, he was actually being carried.
It is a surprisingly emotional and vulnerable end to what is otherwise a very technical, scientific conversation about energy mechanics.
It reminds us that at the end of the day, even a 50-year master who can untie your spiritual knots from across the globe still fundamentally wants to be held by the divine.
For those of you listening who are intrigued and want to find this man's work, and I assume there are many of you, where exactly do they go to verify all this?
His central hub is his website, yogawellness786.com. And he operates in a very open, accessible way. He offers free initial consultations for health and spiritual issues directly via WhatsApp.
Which is wild to think about. You can just message a master-level healer on WhatsApp.
Apparently so. He is genuinely trying to help people on a complementary basis. He makes it very clear his services are completely complementary to the medical fields, absolutely not a replacement for traditional medical treatment. But, and he's very upfront about this, his premium energy healing services for critical care and terminal illness are, in his words, not inexpensive.
He charges a premium for the really heavy lifting.
He does, and he logically justifies it. He says, I practice 8 to 10 hours every single day just to maintain the capacity to do this. When you hire him, you aren't just paying for an hour of his time, you are paying for the 50 years of relentless discipline that makes that hour of telepathic healing even possible. It is the exact same argument you would use for a top-tier neurosurgeon.
That is entirely fair. And for those of you who want to explore his methods on a budget or for free,
He is very generous with his knowledge. He has a YouTube channel called The Blind Muslim Yogi, offered entirely as a free service. He talks about releasing a simplified 30-minute complete yoga protocol there. He also has a podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify under the same name. And if you want more direct interaction, he has a Patreon channel for paid live, daily video lessons and one-to-one consultations.
he really advocates for a scientific approach, a simplified, results-based methodology for ancient sciences.
He wants to revive these lost sciences so they can actually improve your physical health, your peace of mind, and your finances right now.
So as we wrap up, what is the one big takeaway you think we should carry with us from Osman's life?
I think Osman forcefully challenges us to redefine our image of the master. We have this ingrained archetype of the guru sitting alone on a mountain peak, totally detached, blissed out of his mind, and functionally useless to the suffering world. Osman suggests that is actually a spiritual trap. He suggests that the true evolved master is the one who has the power to access that ultimate ecstasy, but willfully turns the dial down, walks back down into the chaotic marketplace, pays the rent, and actually helps heal the people around him.
The absolute hardest yoga isn't levitating in a cave. It is living a highly functional, grounded life while keeping a deeply spiritual heart.
Precisely. That is the real work.
And maybe, just maybe, putting down the phone once in a while so we don't accidentally fry our left channels.
I would highly, highly recommend that part.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you on the next one.